All right, what's up, everybody? Just gonna be doing another one of these where I read some things, give you guys my opinion, and we're gonna see how it goes. This is honestly a lot of fun for me to do this. So I just want to preface by saying, if you like my videos or just the way I talk or sound, maybe, heaven forbid you like the content, feel free to share this. You can share it with anybody you want. I realize that I offer a service a lot less than most people will. And part of the reason is I feel like this type of information should be free, if anything. However, I do understand that this is a service and that incorporating these type of things into your daily life is kind of what you pay for. And I feel like a lot of the extra is just exactly that, extra. So today's video is going to be about meal frequency. A lot of the articles are going to be about diabetics, just because I think it's a lot more prevalent than people want to realize, or even maybe they do realize. I don't know. And since such a large percent of the population is overweight and obese, there are probably a lot more people who are pre-diabetic and don't know about it. Maybe their doctor told them they were pre-diabetic and they don't really want to think about it. But let's just kind of avoid that conversation, because unless you've been a diabetic for over a decade, usually 2 to 3 decades, you can completely reverse it. And very few doctors will tell you that because they don't want to get sued. But I'm not your doctor. So this is all my opinion. You can take it for whatever it's worth. So let's dive into this. All right. So here's an article that says metabolic effects of alterations in meal frequency in type 2 diabetes. Basically, they're talking about this little debate on how often you should eat. And I want to give you guys a little bit of an idea of what they did. Um, so let's see here. Nutrient intakes and all measures were the same in all 3 and 9 meals. So this study had two groups. One of them had 3 meals a day. The other had 9 meals a day. In my opinion, if you're eating 3 meals a day or 9 meals a day, you're really just doing the same thing. You're keeping your insulin up all day long. And I don't really care if it's 3 or 9, because in my opinion, it's all the same. There's zero fasting going on other than when these people are sleeping. And if you've worked with as many people as I have, or just have been out in the world, you know that people don't sleep very well. Very rarely do you find people who actually sleep 7 to 9 hours a night, especially as we age. You get into your REM cycles a little bit faster. You sleep for 4 or 5 hours and you say, hey man, I feel great. But in reality, anyway, let's talk about frequency. So this longer-term study could not confirm the potential benefits of increased meal frequency suggested by comparable 4-week studies in type 2 diabetic individuals and acute experiments in individuals with diabetes. So it could not confirm the potential benefits of increased meal frequency. I will tell you this, the only benefits of eating more frequently is you get to feel happy knowing or thinking that you're doing something good by eating a lot. And so the job of your pancreas, and let's just say a large job of your endocrine system in your gut, is to regulate vitamins, minerals, blood sugar, lipids, protein, amino acids. That's what kind of they become. So by eating as frequently as you possibly can and trying to label it a healthy diet, you are self-regulating your blood sugar. And if you're a type 1 diabetic, you don't really apply to this because your pancreas is not very happy. But for the majority of diabetics, which are type 2, adult onset, basically related to overeating and being overweight and having a lack of insulin sensitivity, which we've talked about, but that just means your body doesn't want to respond to insulin as well as it would like to. So they were not able to confirm the potential benefits because there really are none other than being happy that you're eating all the time. But that in and of itself, in my opinion, is a little bit of a crutch because we as a species need to elicit more control over our daily lives. We need to stop snoozing. We need to be able to put the fork down, hands up, put the fork down. And I know that sounds silly. However, once you start to look into your life and think about all of the things that you don't control, what you put into your mouth and maybe what comes out of your mouth, those are two things that you have full control over. If it gets to the point to where we need to go into how to do this cheap, for less, I'm happy to. But for now, we're just going to talk about, here's one study that basically was not able to find any benefits. It would seem appropriate that meal frequency in those with type 2 diabetes should be left to the personal choice, provided that energy balance is maintained. Energy balance is a little bit of a fun word. Um, I love it when people talk about that because it's almost excluded that you have tens of thousands of calories of energy just sitting in your gut and all over your body. But heaven forbid we want people to actually get rid of that. Healthy people don't go to the doctor. So here's one from Eating Well, eatingwell.com. I'm sure this person is a registered dietitian and they've taken the 6-week courses. Fun fact, I've been declined probably like 50 jobs at this point because I'm not a registered dietitian or a registered health coach. Yet almost every single article I ever read that is completely full of just nonsense they're from registered dietitians and health coaches. And these companies, it's almost weird, you know? That's kind of why I'm doing this in the first place, because it's like eventually we need a wake-up call. And if it's me, cool. If it's not me, cool. If I make you think about something a little bit differently that maybe leads you down the path to researching somebody else that you like more than me, great. I'm over people struggling with this issue because I feel like it's something that we can really solve versus a lot of other problems today that are very difficult to solve. So how often should a person with type 2 diabetes eat? Says Connie Crawley, or the answer by Connie. Everyone needs to eat about every 4 to 6 hours during the day to keep energy levels up. That kind of goes against evolution in a little bit of a sense. We'll talk about that in a second. So people with type 2 diabetes usually have better blood glucose control if their meals and carbohydrates are spaced evenly throughout the day. And that would be based upon the fact that most people with type 2 diabetes are exogenously introducing insulin via subcutaneous injections. Or, metformin. They're essentially trying to play chemist and control a hormone that their body naturally produces. So they have better blood glucose control because they're introducing, metformin, which can increase how much insulin you secrete and your sensitivity to it, less than resistance training and fasting, by the way. Or they're introducing insulin. So if you space out your meals throughout the day and you regulate your carbohydrates that you ingest, it's really easy to control what your blood sugar is. However, you're never going to get off of that insulin no matter what you do if you keep putting it into your body. So too many carbohydrates at one time can raise blood glucose too high, even if you take diabetes medicine, which would be insulin, metformin, or any of the other glipizide, sulfonylureas, GLP-4, GLP-1s, all those different ones that are not very fun to memorize. So you eat a light lunch and then eat too much in the evening. Heaven forbid we eat later in the evening when our insulin sensitivity is at its lowest, or our insulin sensitivity, the likelihood that we are going to spike our blood sugar after you have been eating throughout the day is a lot less than the first meal that you eat because your body has been without glucose and sugar for so long. So a person with diabetes should attempt to eat about the same amount of carbohydrates at each meal. Sure. So this is, again, going along the idea of when you're going to self-regulate your blood sugar with exogenous insulin and medication, it makes it a lot easier to do so when you regulate the amount of carbohydrates you have. Kind of like when you go into surgery, they say don't eat. Like for the whole day before, most people don't do that. Hydration is pretty important. But anyway, it just makes it a lot easier for medications to work when we know how much blood sugar you have because we don't want anybody to bottom out. So breakfast is especially important if you need to control your weight. It helps to jumpstart your metabolism and make you less likely to overeat later. That's a fun sentence right there. So when you eat, you have this hormone at night that gets elevated called cortisol. Cortisol is extremely important in fat metabolism and mobilization, and you have to mobilize the fat before you metabolize the fat. You also have an increase in growth hormone at night. You have an increase of norepinephrine, epinephrine, depending upon where it is in your body, via in your brain or your actual systemic circulation. Yes. So growth hormone is very anabolic. Norepinephrine and epinephrine are very energetic. Cortisol is catabolic. However, everyone's always against cortisol because we talk about it in the light of chronic stress. I'm talking about it in the light of just a circadian rhythm that whenever insulin goes down, cortisol goes up because usually it is a pretty big player in mobilizing your own fat stores, which we want to get rid of, for energy. So the first thing you do when you get up and have breakfast, if you follow the food pyramid, which I think is ridiculous, and if you look into the origins of the food pyramid, we'll do that later. It's really messed up. But as soon as you have some nice piece of toast or carbohydrates, maybe you had Greek yogurt with some what is that called? Not oatmeal. Oh my gosh. Oh my, I'm drawing a blank right now. You guys will know what I'm talking about. All I'm saying is anytime you introduce any type of simple or complex carbohydrate, you're going to be spiking your insulin. Insulin is immediately going to decrease your cortisol and your growth hormone, going way downhill. You are virtually going to start, like, I mean, when you start to get into like how much fat you are losing, it's a lot easier to look into it in like a 30, 90, 120 year long. Your body doesn't really think on a daily basis. That's why it's better to weigh yourself weekly and then average it out every month because it naturally fluctuates, which is why you should do it at the same time of day, blah, 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 blah. So breakfast is especially important if you want to stay diabetic, stop gaining weight or losing weight, or maybe even never start losing weight. Continue to allowing your pancreas to just take the day off, because what happens when you eat breakfast is a lot of the natural mechanisms that are in play in your body to give you energy shut off. If you think evolutionarily, I like to think evolutionarily because it keeps that whole debate of creationism and all that stuff out of it. I don't believe they're mutually exclusive. However, as a species, do you think we'd be very successful if whenever we're hungry, we're not able to focus, or whenever we're hungry, we're not able to perform? That would not be a very successful species. So it makes sense, right, that your epinephrine and norepinephrine, or adrenaline and noradrenaline, increase whenever you don't have food. Stress hormones. Cortisol, stress hormone, right? Insulin, rest and digest, parasympathetic. Cortisol, sympathetic, fight or flight, right? Pupils dilate, everything. You're ready to go. You're ready to get some food. And it's almost like we neglect basic physiology whenever we start talking about present day, first world problems. Because breakfast, you're breaking your fast, and part of the fasting process is mobilizing natural stores of energy, fat and glycogen in your liver and in muscles, and your body is preparing to go look for food, right? We've only really been this first world for, evolutionarily speaking, not very long, right? So if we go back a few thousand years, if you don't have food now, and then compare it to you a few thousand years ago, now without food, we're like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired. I'm so hungry. I just need some food so bad. I can't even think. I'm so drained. Oh, I just want to sit here. Oh my gosh, that Pop-Tart. I'm so ready to go. I'm so amped up. It doesn't make any sense that we would feel at our most alert and ready to do something whenever we're full. That doesn't make any sense. Because as a species, or any species, what happens when you don't have food is you need to get it, right? So your body would be preparing itself to go and get food the longer you go without it. And eventually there's a gray area after a few days where you'll eventually get really hungry. But, just dealing with common daily habitual life, the 12 to 16 hours you go if you have like an early dinner after you sleep all night, your body is just now starting to get into its own glycogen, maybe even deplete it a little bit. The ketosis is going on a little bit more. You're starting to mobilize and use fat. All of those processes they're just starting to happen. And when you eat breakfast every single morning, you're kind of telling your body like, hey, don't worry, I'm going to keep giving you guys lots of sugar. So all those other mechanisms and things that are in place genetically to prepare me to go out and get that food, we don't need them. We don't need them. So naturally, we should be able to switch back and forth between sugar and fat for energy. But with our first world Western diet, we almost never switch into a more ketogenic state. And that's why you have brain fog with ketogenic diets and all this stuff, because we don't really go back into that state. So a lot of enzymes have to be upregulated and created and made, and it takes a little bit of time. So that might be a little bit too much detail, but crawly, breakfast is not important if you want to control your weight. It is important if you just stop having it for a while, because then you can actually control your cravings. Maybe you start to lose a little bit of the ceremony of eating and remove this ridiculous habit that you need to eat breakfast. Breakfast is not the most important meal of the day. It's not. It is not. There's tons of studies that show that our cognitive function is just as good, if not better, in our physical ability to function, granted in short bursts. I'm not necessarily talking about like aerobically. This would be more of an anaerobic thing, which would be, like running away from something or running to something and then eat it, right? You're extremely, okay. So let's just go to the next one before I keep going forever. Why meal timing is important for better diabetes control. You know that what you eat is important for diabetes management. Yeah, it is. Stop having so much sugar and carbohydrates and maybe don't be diabetic anymore. Very few dietitians and health coaches would say that, by the way, but I'm a medical doctor. So to some extent, the timing of meals can play a role with diabetes and weight management. To some extent, to the full extent, the timing of your meals can play a role with your diabetes and your weight management, by the way. The full extent, not some extent. She's being very careful. Let's see. Oh, luckily she's a dietitian. Hopefully she hasn't told too many people this. So research suggests that eating consistently throughout the day can help to attain and maintain glycemic control. Again, this goes back to basically saying that you can control your blood sugar better because we don't want our pancreas to do it. Heaven forbid we do that. The less control we give our pancreas, the more likely we're going to have insulin and then be perpetuating an endless cycle of diabetics and obesity. So yeah, let's do that. All right. Let's see, breakfast. Do you guzzle coffee in the morning? Heaven forbid you have coffee, an appetite suppressant to increase norepinephrine, epinephrine, a little bit of dopamine without glucose, which is basically one of the most addictive substances on the planet when you start looking at the brain chemistry. Heaven forbid you guzzle coffee in the morning. Or do you wait until lunch for your first meal? If so, it's time to change things up for better health. Breakfast is often known as breaking the fast. Yeah, it's in the word. And it is important to give the body and brain the initial fuel to start the day. That is absolutely BS. When you wake up, your body is finally starting to ramp up fat metabolism. And if you want to get into the whole efficiency of burning fat versus burning sugar is a lot easier for your body. I'll say that initially, but once ketosis has been upregulated enough, it's actually more efficient per gram. Anyway, let's just keep going here. I love it. Registered dietitian, nutritionist, and certified diabetes educator. Sure, she's gotten a lot of people off of diabetic medications with that mindset. So if the body does not receive this fuel in the morning, it needs to create its own fuel by releasing blood sugar into the bloodstream, causing blood glucose to increase. So if the body does not receive this fuel in the morning, it needs to create its own fuel, releasing blood sugar, which is kind of what I talked about with glycogen. It's stored in your liver and your muscles, a couple other places, not really necessarily important. And once that's depleted, your body will then take fat. And then once it goes with fat, I think it ends in like acetaldehyde, one of the ketone bodies. And then that basically plugs itself in at the end of the, so in your metabolism, you have glycolysis, which is like a little process that I had to memorize at some point. I'm really glad I forgot it. And you go into the Krebs cycle, then you go into the electron transport chain. And whenever you start using fat, it just plugs in a little bit differently. You make one of the end products of glycolysis and then go through it again. Heaven forbid you want to use the actual fat that you're trying to get rid of. No, give yourself breakfast. Just tell your body it doesn't need to get rid of any. Again, just complete misinformation, totally wrong. Educating diabetes. This is health.usnews.com. Like, this is what we've been telling people for so long, and we wonder why so many people are overweight. It's not because that there are all these idiots who want to be fat and unhealthy, This is the information we've been feeding them. And I have a lot of friends who are doctors who believe this. I have a lot of friends who are doctors that don't believe this. But, the amount of people that are in my camp, so to speak, so few and far between. Most doctors are just trained to follow algorithms so they don't get sued, so they can fall back on that. And then whenever they have to go to court, they can say they did what they were supposed to do. So please don't sue me for that much. Heaven forbid you actually try to make some people actually not need you as much. So, okay. Consequently, skipping breakfast has been shown to cause blood sugar spikes throughout the day. Adds. Okay, so if you skip breakfast, you will continue to increase your insulin sensitivity. I think a lot of this blood sugar spike is this idea that people will just binge whenever they don't have breakfast. And a lot of that is psychological and habitual and ceremonial because we're not having food in the morning. So we're like, oh my gosh, we need to eat so much more. But it's like, it's all psychological, right? You don't actually need food every single day. You know, a lot of us have plenty of meals that could last us a very long time. Granted, we kept our vitamins and minerals and electrolytes fairly regular. Our bodies are pretty resilient once you actually get down into it. We're able to withstand some amazing, tremendous stressors, trauma, and pull through. So, additionally, when you skip breakfast, there's a great chance you'll grab less healthy choices and overeat. This is an us problem. This isn't a them problem. This is an observation. So whenever people skip breakfast, initially they're going to be a lot hungrier than they realize. And hunger goes away once your body starts to be more receptive to leptin and ghrelin and responsive to them. And you'll start to realize it takes a week or two, depending upon how strict you get, but eventually you're not going to be hungry all the time. And that's because you're not hungry all the time. You just think you're hungry all the time because everything you've ever read and been taught growing up with the stupid food pyramid is that you need these well-rounded, super processed carbohydrate meals. Heaven forbid, you know, all the stuff at the very top. All I'm trying to tell you is when you skip breakfast, sure, if you go into it with just this open mindset of, I'm just going to skip breakfast and not consult somebody like me who maybe tells you how to skip breakfast, which I personally don't think it will take very long. Horrible business model, I know, but bear with me here. Eventually, you will realize that you are not as hungry as you think you are, and that once you start feeling better from eating better and timing better, sleeping better, hydrating better, reducing your stress better, your life's going to completely change. And people don't want you to know that. 3 meals versus smaller, more frequent meals. Stop trying to separate. Oh, that was a horrible highlight for hyperbolic purposes. 3 meals versus more frequent meals, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter at all. Once you're having 3 square meals a day, you're thinking breakfast, lunch, dinner, you're eating the entire day. So basically we're saying, do you want to have 3 meals a day or do you just want to snack all day? Both equally bad, in my opinion, for someone trying to lose weight. If you are super diabetic and you're super regulated by insulin, yes, going from very small, more frequent meals to maybe then go back to 3 meals a day, to then maybe going to 2 meals a day, or even staying at smaller, more frequent meals to then incorporate exercise into it, because you might think you know what it's like to be hypoglycemic, but I promise you a lot of the mechanisms that are at play here are you're so insensitive to it. The more you remove food from the equation and the more you stop like idolizing food as this most amazing thing that makes you feel good, because really it just makes you feel good because that's what people tell you. If I mean, that's getting a little bit into the weeds there, but I will just say, you know, I'm all about baby steps. I don't think you should go from eating like 19 small meals a day and thinking that the metabolism is a furnace to then lifting resistance training full body 3 times a week with cardio and accessory lifts the other days of the week, going to 1 meal a day, doing like a 24-hour fast every single. You're just throwing way too much at your body and it'll respond to it. Granted, you don't stroke out or die, but let's back it up a little bit and take it a little slower. I just think people can get caught up and that's why they fail. And that's why nutritionists like this person and most personal trainers fail their clients. They try to do too much at once. They don't actually take the time to explain what they need to explain. And then people, some of them just do, and eventually they don't know the why of why they're doing what they're doing and they fail that way. And other people are just lazy. And so I find the best approach is to actually take some time to explain why someone's going to be doing what they're doing. Maybe even do it. You know, how many doctors who are overweight tell people to lose weight? How many nutritionists are overweight to tell people to lose weight? I know so many type 2 diabetics that want to tell people how to eat to maintain their diabetes. And it's like, if you were really eating to maintain your diabetes, you wouldn't be diabetic anymore. So why are you so hypocritical? Why are so many health practitioners? Okay, last article. How many times a day should a diabetic eat? That is just very interesting. Please stop playing. Great shot there. So, controlling blood sugar levels is the most important task in managing diabetes effectively. Yeah, you want your body to actually control it. Uncontrolled blood sugar levels can cause serious complications, like continuing to eat and giving your pancreas less and less control, being less and less sensitive to insulin, and eventually being completely reliant on insulin, maybe even having dialysis because you don't control your blood sugar well enough. Then eventually your kidneys shut down, you start having neuropathy, blah, 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 blah. Great. Eating the proper foods with the correct frequency is important. So now we're going to try and maybe market diets with this. We're going to market our meal plan and all this stuff. It's all marketing. It's all designed to keep you unhealthy, keep you overweight, keep you alive as long as they can. So anyway, diabetes and blood sugar, it's pretty straightforward. How food affects your blood sugar, you eat it. Then it goes to your bloodstream. And if you're not very receptive to insulin, the glucose transporters do a really bad job at getting it out of your bloodstream. Then your hemoglobin A1C goes up. If your blood sugar is high enough for long enough, you have neuropathy. It starts incorporating itself into every single tissue in your entire body, and eventually you just fall apart. That was a little grim. So, eating small portions up to 6 times per day to control your blood sugar states the smallsteps.gov. Oh my God. To begin, you can try using smaller saucer-sized plates. Portion control is really cool. I don't think it's cool in a way that it's effective at all. I think it's really cool because you're actually eliciting some control over your life, and we almost allow life to control us in every facet. And diet is one of those few areas where we should have complete control. We should have complete control over our diet and what we put into our mouth. So, although the foods you may eat per meal have a different caloric content, you will, and that would probably be related to the fact that the different macronutrients, fat, sugar, and protein have different calories per, each of them have different calories. So maybe that's what they mean, or it just means it's different stuff. So you'll take in fewer calories per meal than you if you were eating on a full plate. Heaven forbid you're able to intuitively eat and control how much you eat on your own. No, let's just give ourselves a small plate because we're too stupid to be able to regulate anything on our own. That's essentially like having a smaller plate is like eating a lot of meals to control your blood sugar. You're just band-aiding a problem that's super easy to fix. Again, I'm glad I don't get too worked up about it. So eating small, well-balanced meals throughout the day is the best plan for preventing elevated blood sugar. No, having a pancreas and a body that actually responds to blood sugar and gets rid of it to self-regulate it, and when you go without it long enough, you start metabolizing fat to then regulate your blood sugar. That is the best plan, and it's super simple and it's super easy. And if people just did if the people that do my program actually did what I say, which is the simplest wellness and weight loss program you'll ever have in your entire life, you might actually roll your eyes when you read it. If they did just 5 of the 7 things, which in reality there's actually like 10 or 12, but I keep it at 7 most of the time. They just did like 5 of the 7. Their life would completely change. Their blood pressure would go down. They would no longer be pre-diabetic. I bet their allergies would decrease if they actually took into consideration the experiment with fasting. A lot of the inflammation systemically would go down because they would be not only more receptive to cortisol, it wouldn't be as chronically elevated because reducing stress is a big part of it. Blah, blah, blah. Let's see. Not only should you watch what you eat, you must also consider the glycemic index of beverages you're drinking. Yeah, just drink 0-calorie things. There's a lot of debate on like these this like artificial sweetener thing, and there's several different artificial sweeteners, and they have like this increased cancer risk. But whenever you start to get really, brass tacks with artificial sweeteners and the amount of increased risk of cancer, and then you break it down into the increased risk of particular cancers by being overweight and sedentary, it's really interesting when you look at how they actually balance out. And a lot of people say that when you have artificial sweeteners, they're more likely to eat real sweets later. And to me, I think that's just kind of assuming that people, if we actually told them what was going on, that they would just stay stupid. And I think if you want to get your sweet fix from some fake sugar, good. Just know that traditionally, people who have fake sugar are more likely to have real sugar. And if you tell somebody that, you immediately just throw a monkey wrench into the whole thing. Because now you're letting people think about what they're doing. And when you make people think about what they're doing, sometimes they're a little bit more likely to not Oh, sorry, phone was ringing. Sometimes they're a little bit more likely to not follow, the stream, or the I don't know, Dead Poet Society insert right there, as far as, oh, captain by captain, not following along and being individual. I just believe that you people and us as a human race are not idiots. And that if somebody, be it me or someone else, decides to tell you what actually goes on in your body and why doing things a little bit differently, but not necessarily entirely differently, and why there's not really one particular diet that works the best unless you maybe broke down your entire genetic code and found exactly what you're sensitive to. I think our bodies are designed and have evolved to be pretty resilient and responsive to various stressors, illnesses, sensitivities, insensitivities. And depending upon the state that we are in, I don't know. It's really interesting once you actually just change a few things in your life to see how your body completely changes overnight almost. We'll say within a week or two of just doing a few things right. You'll feel so much better. You'll feel better than you've felt in decades. So if that's the kind of stuff you're interested in, just reach out to me. I'd be happy to help anybody. I still have quite a few open spots, and I'm really only wanting to take in somewhere between 50 and 75 people, because after that it's gonna get too much like a number. But anyway, here's today's video going over some of these articles. I hope you liked it. Hope it wasn't too bad. So, all right, talk to you guys later.